Hello everyone, welcome to Breaking the Box. I'm your host Tushar Saini, and in this podcast we talk about stories of brilliant founders who don't think outside the box, rather break the box to do things to change the world. In this episode, we are going to talk about a startup started by two childhood friends whose passion for design, sustainability, and social entrepreneurship led them to leave their brilliant corporate careers and start an eco-friendly homeware company. Today, this brand caters to customers like Adani Group, Chumbak, Taj Hotels, Hamleys, and many more. To talk about how they started and expanded their business to various countries, we have with us Pratima Sinha, the co-founder of Nurture India. So Pratima, tell us what exactly is your venture by the name of Nurture India?
Pratima, and I started Nurture India with Soumya, who's my co-founder, in 2018. We actually started it in 2017 end, but 2018 is when we registered the company. The whole idea is Nurture India. It actually derives from theme. It's a brand for handmade products, all made in India by artisans of the country from across states, UP, Karnataka, Rajasthan. And we provide them a platform, we give them designs, and we provide them a platform to reach out to international markets as well as market in the country. And there are two elements to it. One is, of course, the handmade aspect. The other is sustainable. We've been working around wood, different types of woods, because wood is a natural element. And we've been trying to create a disruption or, trying to replace what is already being used in the homeware space. You have ceramic everywhere, you have glass, plastic, so much plastic. So we've been trying to educate people as well on why we should switch to sustainable consumption. And wood is, of course, one of the most natural materials. And we started with the home decor segment. So we have dinnerware and home decor products mainly. You have plates, trays, coasters, cups, spoons, everything in wood. And that's the brand. So it's been around 3 years now. We have presence in India. We are also present outside the country. We export to UK, US, Germany, Spain, Peru, Saudi Arabia, UAE, quite a few countries. And we have presence in India. We have supplied to some of the big names. Taj Hotels, Chumbak is one of our clients, Future Group is a client, Hamleys is our latest collaboration. We provide organic wooden toys to them. And we are slowly expanding with them outside the country as well. That's
all right, amazing. So this is like a lot of work in 3 years, and kudos to the team and the co-founders. So Pratima, going back to your college years, or let's say even school years, would you say that you were very sure that you want to be an entrepreneur, or was this like a journey of discovery where you realized that this is a cause I believe in and I want to work on this cause and support the artisans of the country?
So that realization came over time. What was there from the beginning? So Soumya and I are actually school friends, childhood friends. We know each other since more than 15 years. So when we were together in school, we used to take these art and craft classes together. We were a lot into designing and painting. We even gave design entrances. But then we took our, regular education paths. I went for my BCom honors. She went for her English honors. Post that, I did my MBA. She did journalism, masters in journalism. And then we were working in our jobs, and that is when we realized both of us were 25 at that time. We obviously loved designing, and we started studying the market. We saw there's a huge scope in terms of the supply for sure, because India has a large number of artisans, untapped potential. Actually, I think there are more than 50% artisans in India of the world, and in terms of exports, the percentage is very, very low. So there was this huge untapped potential. Plus, there was demand for Indian handmade products, and even in India, the demand was rising. So we just mixed the two, our passion for design as well as the market opportunity, and that is when we decided to take this leap. And while we were working, in fact, we took sabbaticals from our jobs and to study the market, to travel around the country. We went to West Bengal, UP, Karnataka. But only once we were absolutely sure that this is something we can do is when we actually quit our jobs and got into it full time.
All right, that's great. So what kind of field work did you guys do? Actually on the field, going village to village, experimenting on what kind of art culture, art form that is prevalent there. So what kind of field work was involved while you're talking about research?
So we met the artisans. We studied. There is this huge encyclopedia on various handicrafts of the country. We bought that. We studied a few craft forms, shortlisted a few. Then we actually went there. We started with West Bengal. We actually camped there for a few days. We met the few artisans there, understood how different products are made, which are the markets they supply to, how do they procure the raw materials, and what is the kind of evolution that's happening in terms of design. So understanding all of that, if there are master artisans or whether, so most of the artisan industry is unorganized. Most of them work from their own houses. You give them work and they'll have these small machines. They'll work at their own houses. Government has also set up many units. I think mostly in apparel. They also have set up factories where the artisans can go and actually work. But a lot of it is still unorganized. So to understand that, how should we go about it? Whether we should coordinate with 50 artisans separately or whether we should work with one master artisan who has 20, 30 other artisans under him. Because having a local connection is very, very important.
Absolutely.
So that was the kind of research we did, and then we traveled to other places as well. After West Bengal, we went to Karnataka, then we went to UP, then Rajasthan, and post that we started giving them sample orders and then production orders, and with some of them the connections eventually faded off because either the products were not up to the mark. With others, obviously the connections became stronger because they could provide good quality products at the right time. So, just managing all of that then happened eventually, and then the relationships and bonds started getting stronger with time.
All right, great. So, Pratima, you did mention that, you get to go to SRCC, then you were doing your MBA at SP Jain.
Yes.
And after that, you were working with KPMG for a while and a couple of other corporates as well. So, how did this transition happen, or was it like a difficult transition, or was it like comfortable? What were the challenges while you were thinking of leaving your job? Because job is comfortable, you're getting a paycheck every end of the month. It is comfortable. There are defined KRAs that you have to do, but as an entrepreneur, you just have to do everything with very little time that is there. So how was the transition? How was the transition in terms of your financials, in terms of your thinking process, in terms of how you used to live? So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
So, I think it's just a blanket advice for anybody who's getting into entrepreneurship. It's very important that you feel very strongly for what you're getting into, because you may be able to research, and you should research about the industry you're entering, but you get a lot of reality checks along the way. So when we quit our jobs, we were 25, and I had about 2.5 years of experience. So I had that safety net. I'd completed my master's, so I had a safety net. So I wasn't scared at all about this not working and then having to go back to job, because we can do that, right? A business takes about 3 to 4 years, 2 to 3 years to get somewhere. So we were comfortable in our own spaces. We took a calculated risk. We had savings. So I have invested my savings completely. I haven't borrowed from anybody to start the business. And over time we got a lot of reality checks. We had to explore a lot of different channels. We started with exports as our end goal, but as we started entering the space, we realized that this is dominated by bigger export houses and people who are seniors, first generation, second generation businessmen, third generation businessmen. So people our age, especially girls, weren't getting to this space because it involves dealing with a lot of artisans who are mostly male and going to these remote locations. UP being one of them, and UP is not the safest. Even for us, we had to take a lot of precautions to travel. So we learned a lot of things along the way. We explored a lot of channels and understood what works for us, what works for the products that we are making and the designs that we're making, whether it's the premium market, non-so premium market. So understanding all of that helped. But you really need to be passionate about the business, because only then you can go through all the hurdles and come out successful, because it requires patience. We got our first big order from UK almost about 8 months after we started. So that 8 months of struggle to get there, and once you get the big order, then you can use that name to get more and more orders. And then we onboarded Taj Hotels. Once we had Taj onboarded, we could get Adani, we could get Future Group. So slowly and gradually you can reach to other customers. But the first order will take some time. So it's important that you are completely invested in it and keep trying hard through the process.
That's that's incredible. Getting such brands on board is in itself like a challenge, and you getting a big order from UK, I would say 8 months is a good amount of, not like a very a huge amount of time, but short span of time for you to get somebody and a big order from the UK. And Pratima, you also mentioned that you do face challenges in terms of a particular industry being dominated by a particular class or a gender, if I may say. So, what kind of suggestions would you have for somebody who is starting and is in a similar dilemma and is not, able to understand of what exactly has to be done?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
So if somebody feels that they are operating in a system where they might be the minority or they might not be the preferred, kind of entrepreneurs or kind of background which they possess is not something which is, preferred, how would you suggest them to look at that situation or move forward in that case?
Okay. So see, it's at one place we all say that we should be breaking the glass ceiling and just be brave, go out there. But I think it's also very important to be practical a lot of times. When I was going to quit my job, my bosses at KPMG told me to actually work for an export house first, understand how it works, and then move on to starting my own company. But I took the call to anyway start it. I think had I taken some time to learn from the industry by actually working in it, it would have really helped. It helps to come from the same industry if you're trying to enter that industry instead of starting on your own from scratch. Because especially the export industry, which is not so prominently out there, you have to actually meet these people, exporters, talk to them to understand how business is done. Government is involved. There are so many government provisions that are there. You exhibit outside the country, in the country. So a lot of things that you understand along the way. I think we could have saved 1 year if we had actually invested that 1 year working with someone. But then it's very subjective. You can't always quit your job and then work for someone else, not from a very different industry, not even knowing whether or not you will actually do it. So I mean, it's a very subjective call, but I would suggest it's important to understand the realities of any industry. If you can get some work experience, that's the ideal thing to do. Otherwise, it's not always necessary to break glass ceilings. So for example, in our sector, once we realized, even in the export sector, there are certain kind of people that we have decided not to work with. Because there are middlemen in the industry who actually, so there are big importers, right, in other countries. They don't deal directly with the manufacturer. They might want a middleman from a local middleman from India who will come and inspect the factories, etc. So those kind of people have certain powers and they are manipulative at times. So understanding what works for you, even as personalities, like both Soumya and I are not the kind of people who would, we only speak what we know. Okay, so we can't oversell or we don't do that kind of things. There are people who can do that, who can faff more than there is. But we're mostly about substance. So I think understanding your own personalities also and knowing what works for you is important. And it's important to prioritize your channels and your connections at the right time. So not everybody can do everything. Understanding that is important. And then you find your way in the industry of what works best for you. But I think there is space for everybody everywhere. So you just need to identify it at the right time.
All right. So Pratima, I also, get to interact with a lot of juniors and a lot of students who are in college or are just starting their jobs. So preferred career path which people see for themselves is that we are going to do a job for 4 years. After that, we are going to leave our jobs and then we are going to start our entrepreneurial ventures and we'll be minting money like left and right. So what are your thoughts on this? So would you say that your corporate experience has added tremendously in what you are doing today? Or would you say that, a person who wants to start can, start entrepreneur or their entrepreneurship journey right away and corporate experience might not, even be required because that leads to an opportunity cost that is, being wasted. What are your suggestions on this?
I think, like I said, it's important that you feel strongly for something, whatever you want to start, and that feeling can come at any point of time. So even if it happens while you're in college. So I've done a few entrepreneurial projects during college as well, but they were not full-time. But if somebody feels strongly for a certain field, a certain industry, they should definitely explore it. Why not? Of course, work experience adds to that. If I had worked for a few more years in consulting, I think I would have planned this a little better. So there is always that aspect, but I'm not sure if if I had spent those many years more working in consulting, I would have wanted to leave my job after 5-6 years. So it's a trade-off. So I think it's very important to. It's a very intuitive decision. I think you have to follow your heart when it comes to entrepreneurship, and even in terms of exiting, like you mentioned, people think that they can make a lot of money. No doubt, in business you can make a lot of money. Not just entrepreneurship is actually business, right? In business, there is no stop at growth, right? You can keep growth if it's
Absolutely.
it depends on the industry, or it depends on your USPs. It depends on how much hard work you put into it. If all those paths are correct, if they're right, if the industry is growing, then why not? But then there are reality checks. According to statistics, 90% of businesses fail or don't grow as fast as expected. That is one reality check. So you should know when to enter. You should know when to exit. But I think one should follow their hearts. Once they are, if they feel strongly for something, they should get into it after sufficient amount of research. And if they think it's not working out for them, then they shouldn't also waste time. There's no right time for entrepreneurship. You can start early and grow fast, or you can even do it in your 30s, 40s, 50s. Whenever you feel it's the right time. I strongly believe that there's no time to start for starting a business.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful thought. And this is a dilemma of a lot of students and a lot of juniors I interact with. So Pratima, you mentioned that you and Soumya had this passion for design, and you guys wanted to start something in the entrepreneurial side. But how did you really pinpoint and say that this is something you want to work for? You did not go for apparels. You did not. You had an option of going to apparels. You had an option of this entire variety of option you had with you. But how did you pinpoint and said that this is something you want to do? And did you guys also pivot your business in terms of products, in terms of your market, in terms of your strategy?
So I think when we started, we shortlisted ceramic, in fact, not wood. Start with, we went and looked at Khurja. It's one of the locations in UP. It's actually the biggest cluster in India for ceramic products. But we also had to understand the competition that's there from China. Competition is a big aspect of understanding your industry. So that is when we decided to switch to wood, and the whole story around natural made sense for us. When we started, I think we started with homeware products, like I said, kitchenware and dining products. Over time, we've also added a lot of products. I think that is where we started differentiating or started adding more products. We started a bit of trading as well, because there are a lot of artisans who explore designs at their places or in their small units, and they don't have the platform to actually reach to other markets. So even collaborating with them made sense for us. You can't design everything. You need to have a lot of varieties. It's not an industry where it's not a product that it's not one product that you can keep selling. The industry changes. You have to come out with new collections every quarter, even in apparel. So we started doing that. Why we chose wood and homewares? Because homewares is a smaller segment. The kind of budgets we were looking at, it was practical to start with homeware, because furniture is another segment, but it's a large ticket size, and apparel needs some sort of manufacturing investment. So considering all those factors, this made sense for us to start small. Over time, we ventured into toys as well, when we identified wood and organic toys as being a big market, and we cracked Hamleys, which was a breakthrough deal for us. We're at 13 stores across India in Hamleys, and now Hamleys is planning to take our products outside India as well, made in India, because Reliance acquired Hamleys, and that itself is great. So now we can hope for Indian dominance in Hamleys as well across the world. I think that's the plan, and going forward we do plan to expand into other categories for sure. Home decor is another segment, eventually maybe small furniture as well. That pivot is definitely needed, because you need to keep reinventing yourself, understanding your customers, and how the market is evolving, and even adding more materials. Wood is just one. There is bamboo. There are so many other organic materials. So all that we keep studying on the side, and we have plans to expand into that eventually.
Thank you. Great. So, Pratima, we see that classic problems with startups working in sustainability sector, or generally, acceptance of sustainability products is less, because if we compare it with other products that are available in the market, other products are cheaper, they are more accessible, they are longer lasting. But the alternatives which are sustainable might not be, as cheap or as accessible as the other products. These are high premium price products, which makes this kind of product only, attractive for one particular segment of audience or one particular segment of customer, which is a problem in terms of scalability. So how do you look at that? Would you say that you would want to stick only at that particular segment and would want to cater and acquire a large piece of that part? Or how do you look at scalability of Nurture India as a startup?
So there are two aspects to it. One is the cost aspect that you mentioned. It's actually a myth, I would say, that handmade or sustainable products are actually expensive. It's completely a myth because it's very value based pricing that happens. Even plastic products or metal products that are made, thousands and thousands of them are made together in a factory in one day. All glass, plastic and metal products are made in factories, and thousands of units are made in one day. But it depends on the design. If the design is good, you can sell, and they're made cheaply actually. They're quite cheap, but they are sold at such premiums because the designs are unique. So it's a very value-based pricing, and wooden products in fact are made by artisans. They're made in wood, which is a cheap material. It doesn't require a big factory. So if you look at
also, sorry to cut you, but I would want to clarify. So I believe it is that waste the wood that is there, because people might think that because wood is being used, trees are being cut, which is not eco-friendly. But I believe that this is the wasted wood that you guys collect.
Yeah, it is wasted wood. It is also the plantation woods that are grown, the trees that are grown especially for harvesting. Also, the trees are not harvested from roots. They are harvested from the top so that the tree can. And we also work with mostly trees that grow within 4 to 5 years. Like mango wood is one of the most common woods. So considering all these factors, that's how we position ourselves as eco-friendly. And coming back to your point, so yeah, it's perception-based pricing. So it's not like it's expensive. Secondly, sustainable is not the only story here. We are also relying on functionality. Our products have multi-utility. We are focusing on the design aspect as well. So it's not just a sustainable story. We understand completely that if you just keep yourself as a sustainable brand, it's a niche market, at least today. But we know people are becoming more aware, creating that awareness and pushing people to actually switch to more eco-friendly products. So we keep getting these questions. We have a chat bot on our website. And people keep asking us, this is one of the questions, wood trees are cut, so how is wood sustainable? So we have blogs on that where we are creating awareness. We have videos of showing them how wood products can be maintained. People think wooden products can't be washed. So we wash them and give oils with them. You can actually keep maintaining the wooden products. And so all the aspects around it. It's not just the sustainable aspect that you can sell. You have to sell functionality. You have to sell utility. Especially India is a highly price sensitive market. So you have to tell them a lot of value additions that your product can do, and that is how you convince them to buy.
Correct. Absolutely. So Pratima, founders have this dilemma of either being bootstrapped or raise funding. And Nurture India till now has been bootstrapped startup and has been doing pretty well. So what is your suggestion to the founders? And if you are, given this give this offer that you have the opportunity to raise good amount of money or are being offered good amount of money by a good VC or an institutional investor, what would be your reaction to that?
So actually, as a matter of fact, we have tried to raise funds. It also depends on the kind of industry you're in, the kind of industry we are in, where we are establishing a brand. It's important to either show enough traction, or to show an idea, a disruptive idea that for sure can change the market. Or how you have like Oyo or Uber, that kind of changed the market completely. So for us, it was more about the brand building. And since we started with B2B and exports, getting a VC was difficult for us. But getting a strategic investor is an option where we are in touch with a few people. Because it depends. If your business is fast growing, then a VC would be interested, or an angel investor with expecting higher returns would be interested. If your business is more of a brand or a stable and steady growing business, then a strategic investor would make more sense, who would also have some interest in the business and can add a lot of value to your business. So we are definitely open to that idea. In fact, we've been talking to people. We're looking for some because it's important to grow, and especially to grow a brand, need to constantly pump in money. Your growth is after a point directly in relation to how much money proportional to how much money you invest. So it is sort of important now.
All right, great. Other thing I wanted to ask is, you did mention that you have a lot of good brands on board, and for somebody or a third party looking from the perspective of a brand like yours acquiring such a big player, would you want to walk us through of how did this entire journey start, or how did you really land your first big client or a big brand on board? So what was the entire back-end process of how did you really follow up, how did you reach out and everything?
Okay, so initially, like I said, both Soumya and I don't come from business background firstly, and we definitely had zero experience in the export or the brand building side of this industry. So we learned along the way. When we first exhibited our first set of designs, and the designs were also made by us. It was just the two of us actually, and few temporary labor on and off during the first 1.5 years. It was just the two of us. So we designed the first collection. We exhibited at this export fair that happens in Greater Noida for handicraft products. So we learned there, we networked with people there to understand what others were doing. We visited their stalls to see the quality of products that they are selling, the kind of discussions people have, because a lot of foreigners visit. So what kind of discussions they have, how is it exactly done, even basic things like exchanging cards and stapling it in your notebook and writing notes, like very basic things we learned along the way. Post that, we had a good list of leads from that exhibition. We started reaching out to them. We used to constantly email them. Very few of them converted because that was the first time. After that, we tried various channels across the next 1 year or so. We tried cold calling and cold emailing within India. We have pretty much reached out to everybody, all the big retailers, and that's how we landed Chumbak, Hometown, Hamleys. I mean, those cold calls, and a lot of times we even just ended up at the office. So Shoppers Stop, we actually just went, and because we weren't able to get through the right person, the buyer. So we just went there with our products, and finally they did not meet us that time, but they gave us an appointment for a later time, and we went there at a later time, and we could get some order from there as well. So a lot of these things also happen where you have to just put yourself out there. You first need to have a set of products and designs ready, and then you have to go out there and keep trying, and keeping aside your you can't have your ego very high, because a lot of times people just cut the phone on your face. Even smaller buyers, we used to call them as well, and they used to cut the phone on our face, and us time you're not in a position where you can negotiate because you're just starting out. Now we've reached a place where we can actually say no to so many people. We don't take small orders now, and we understand, because obviously it's not economical to take small orders, and we've reached a place where we can get bigger orders. And now we've reached a place where we're getting a lot of orders on its own, and we get a lot of repeat orders because we've supplied good products, good quality products, and those clients want to maintain that relationship with us. But initially it's a struggle to identify the channels, cold calling, cold emailing. A lot of things happened offline that time. Over time we moved digital. Obviously digital marketing is something that you can absolutely not ignore today. Email marketing, social media marketing, having a strong website, SEO, SEM, understanding those aspects and learning along the way. So I have taken courses on digital marketing. Apart from hiring interns as well, we have also been learning how to most optimally get returns from your ads on social media. So all of these things you learn, where your audience is, how to reach out to them in the best possible way.
Great, absolutely. Pratima, at this point of time, how would you say, this sales channel look like? So there are multiple channels you might be using. You would be using your website. There is Amazon. There is export. So where is the most active sales channel, which you would say?
If for retail, our website is the most active sales channel. It also depends on your strategy, because we know few people in the industry who only focus on Amazon. We also have Amazon sellers we sell to who are sitting in US, who sell on Amazon there, and we sell to them. They are our B2B clients who buy in bulk from us and sell on Amazon there. So it depends on your strategy completely. We are more focused on B2B and exports. So for us, the channel recently we got listed on Alibaba because it's the biggest B2B platform to reach out to a lot of international players. Amazon also, we are present in Amazon India, Myntra, a few other marketplaces where it's important to get listed for visibility. But most of our orders and margins come from your website. Ultimately, it's about a game of margins, right? It's the profit.
Correct.
So it's important to identify where you get the maximum revenue and maximum margins with the least amount of effort and cost, which you understand over time depending on, one is definitely your industry, but it's also about your designs, what kind of products you cater to. Because Amazon, we've been listed since day one. We weren't doing e-commerce on our website, but before that we were listed on Amazon. But Amazon may the audience wants thoda mass products, and as were designers. So very few of our SKUs actually worked on Amazon, which we identified early on. So we stopped advertising on Amazon. We instead moved to our own website or Instagram. So understanding that aspect is also important. And email marketing and social media engagement, these kind of activities help stay in touch with your audience. Blogs, write a lot of blogs about your designs, production facilities, showing videos to people about how your products are made, keeps things transparent. And people value that also a lot these days. Just, constantly being out there with the least amount of cost, of course, to get the maximum returns is very important for a startup.
All right, great. So Pratima, also I would love to talk about how did you guys really get into exports? How was the entire experience? And if a startup, so a lot of startups, especially in Jaipur where I'm based out of, they want to export because it is the hub of textile and jewelry, and everybody wants to export. So any student entrepreneur who is wanting to get into that space, what are the list of to-dos, or what are the list of things he or she has to do to explore that area and to excel at it?
So it's very important, if you don't come from that background, to talk to a lot of people who are in the industry. Firstly that. Secondly, the government also has these export promotion councils, and government is very supportive in promoting exports, especially handicrafts and handlooms. So in fact, we also took a program by them, which was a 2 to 3 months online program for getting into the export industry, and that really helps. It at least gets you in touch with the basics. So yeah, you can even go for that course. Just go through the export promotion councils and what do they have to offer. Traditionally, exports happen through trade fairs across throughout the year, and there are Indian trade fairs, there are international trade fairs. One can start with participating in Indian trade fairs, and the government is very active in getting international buyers to India during those fairs. I think maybe in another 6 months that should restart. Not right now, but right now also virtual trade fairs happening. So government has been really active in promoting handlooms. We've participated in 2 virtual trade fairs, and we've also gotten orders from there, from different countries. So that participating in trade fairs, understanding while you're at the trade fair, understanding what other people are doing, understanding the pricing, the kind of designs that work. You can target a few countries to start with, because you can't make products for the whole world, because the demand that is there in UK is very different from Europe. In fact, UK and European markets are very different. Spain, Germany have very designer-oriented demand, whereas UK is very basic. UK and US are very similar. Australia is again very different. So understanding what market works for you, currently where are most of the products being exported to, and then studying that market and designs more, and then coming out with designs around that will help you stay focused. I think focus is extremely important in terms of both category of products that you're entering or the kind of markets you're targeting. And then communicating the same to the buyer. Once you do one trade fair in India, then you can move international. If you have those kind of budgets, you can do trade fairs outside the country as well. I think a couple of things. And then obviously persistence is very important in exports, because B2B and B2C is very different. B2C is very impulsive. Like as customers, we see something we like and we immediately buy. We don't put a lot of thinking into it.
Absolutely.
Whereas B2B is actually an organization. There is one buyer who chooses the products, and then he has to take approvals, then he has to negotiate the prices, and then he will place a bulk order. A bulk investment is being made into your products. So persistently telling them about your products, being in their email like once in 10 days, consistently emailing them, trying to maintain. It's a very relationship based transaction. It's not a transactional experience, it's a relationship based experience. Once you get a client on board, they stay with you for a long time. They will keep coming back to you. So that is the kind of investment you have to make. You have to understand who your target market is. Be there. Even if you onboard 4 good clients who contribute to 80% of your business, that's good enough. You pamper them, you give them more designs, you customize things for them. So those kind of relationships are important in the export market.
Great. So Pratima, for the last leg of the conversation, because we have some minutes left, I want to wrap it up in as soon as possible, but there are a couple of questions I wanted to really ask. So coming to questions related to you as a person and understanding who Pratima exactly is. So I think first, one of the most important question in the mind of an entrepreneur is how to find a good co-founder. You did mention that Soumya has been your childhood friend, and therefore it was an easy choice, if I may say so, for you to have her on board. But being a friend and working as a business partner are two very different things, because there are a lot of different decisions you have to make, which are serious decisions. So what are the qualities an entrepreneur should be looking for in a co-founder, because that becomes very important.
Right. So Soumya and I, obviously the one thing that connected us was we were friends and both of us love design. But fortunately, we also come from complementary backgrounds. So while I had done an MBA and I had that business finance experience, Soumya comes from a journalism background. She used to write about fashion. So she was very design oriented, two very different personalities as well. I am someone who's more who likes planning and who likes setting targets and going by plans and meeting those targets. She's somebody who's very spontaneous, taking things by the day, being more spontaneous. And I think a mix of both is required when you're running a startup, because startup is not as simple as doing a job. You have, like I said, you have reality checks along the way. You may make certain plans, but then they may not work according to how you want them to be. And that time it's important that you stay you keep at it, and it's important to be okay with ambiguity. That I definitely learned how to be okay with ambiguity, because I am somebody who likes planning and who likes things by the plans. But since that did not happen as much, being with Soumya really helped. So I think if you see, it's also, I think trust is a very, very important factor in choosing a co-founder. Trust and understanding. So even if your skills are not complementary exactly, you can still go ahead if you have the same kind of vision. You have the same kind of interest, that both of you can put the same amount of efforts, because that is very important that you're on the same page from the beginning. Both of you want to put that much energy and efforts and positivity into it and believe in the vision. Your visions should be aligned. So that is very important. Otherwise you can start, and then even so for example, we don't come, neither of us has a tech background, whereas tech is important these days. Getting your website, having the best website, having the best interface is extremely important. So we could outsource that work to a great extent, and even going forward, if we need someone to handle the tech part, we are open to giving ESOPs or hiring someone at a high pay. Those are kind of decisions that you take along the way, because you can't have everything from the co-founders from day one. People get co-founders along the way also. You can start alone, and then once you find a partner who makes sense for you, you can get them on board. And then a third partner on board, eventually a fourth partner on board. So there is no right or wrong rule to it. It's just important that both of you, or three of you, or whoever does it, whoever starts, has the vision. The visions are aligned, the ideas are aligned. It's important to communicate that from day one. It's also important to put things on paper, because I've also heard of a lot of co-founder conflict happening along the way, where one co-founder may stop working or may completely lose interest, and then those agreements then come into the picture. And it's very important to have things on paper, even if you're friends. So Soumya and I know each other since so many years, but we still had our agreement from day one in place. So these are kind of very hygiene checks that you anyway need to do, whoever you're working with. Trust and understanding, definitely most important to start a business with someone. Business is like, I've heard people say that choosing a co-founder is way more important, a more important decision than choosing your life partner. I think it is important.
So, even if you're best of friends and so compatibility is 100%, there would be instances where, there might be conflict in terms of how you're thinking or how the other co-founder is thinking, and there might be misunderstandings that might be happening. So how do we successfully solve them, and how do you move ahead from them, and get and build that relationship even stronger. So can you, from your instances or from your experiences, would you want to talk something about that?
So we've also had quite a few clashes, in fact, and we also think very differently. So I'm somebody who's more inclined towards exports, whereas she's more inclined towards brand building and growing the retail side of business. But we could come to a midway where we understood, okay, retail brand building involves more amount of investment. So let's do that eventually. Let's start with exports. Let's have a stable recurring revenue first, and then we can reinvest. And that's exactly how it happened. We started with exports. We have B2B business coming in, and since the last 6-8 months, since COVID lockdown started, that's when we launched e-commerce properly. We rejigged our website, and we started reinvesting in retail. So I think coming to midways is important, because one person cannot impose their decision on the other person, and they shouldn't also. It's important if you know each other's vision from day one, but even along the way, if you face clashes, it's important to be patient with each other, sit and talk about it, and see how you can reach a midway. Then you can also divide functions. I think we also divided functions once in between, where Soumya took over design and operations, and I started managing finance and marketing more. So we decided, okay, we'll do everything together, but let's have the designated person have the final say on the decision. So those kind of agreements also help when you try to be on the same page most of the times, but when you're not, the other person whoever is handling that function can have the final say on it. So I think along the way also you realize, you understand, if your vision is strong, if you really want to grow the company, and both of you want to grow the company, right, you would want to reach a midway. Nobody wants stress along the way. So yeah, I mean these are few ways you can ensure peace, and peace is very important. You can't be stressed. The business already gives you a lot of stress. You can't have stress from your team.
Absolutely, they are supposed to be a family.
Yeah.
And also, Pratibha, one second, just quickly refer to the list of questions. Yes, so one of the last questions which I wanted to ask is that as an entrepreneur, we have a lot of good days, but a lot of bad days as well. And what is your strategy of dealing with your bad days? How do you convince yourself that everything is going to work and this is not going to crash? So what is your strategy of dealing with your bad days?
I think talking to people helps. Talking to your family, having that kind of support system in place is very important, that your family believes in it. And I think having a co-founder really helps. If I would suggest anybody who's starting out to have a partner, at least one more partner, because a lot of times actually you have those bad days, or the other person has a bad day, so then you are somebody who can push. You need to keep pushing each other up, basically. That's how it works. And even if you're doing it alone, it's important to talk to people in the industry. If you have any questions, I think networking is extremely important, to be in touch with people who are in the industry, to help you come out of it, or just relax, take a break. It's your own business. Give yourself that break. Just take 3 days off, go somewhere, because in a business you can never really take an off, right? Even when you're on vacation, when things are happening, your team will keep calling you. So it's okay to just don't put pressure on yourself, because there's no right time. So many brands and so many companies take years to get to a place, whereas there are other smaller brands that we keep reading about, all the successful companies these days. That's what we think. Okay, startups are supposed to grow fast, but that's not the reality. That's probably just 1% of the actual the so many companies that have started recently. Not everybody takes the same amount of time to reach to a certain position. So just give yourself that break. It will happen. It will happen in time, and you just need to keep working. Just stay focused on your work, and if you're working hard, you'll eventually get there. So believing that is very important.
Amazing. So the last question, I have already, we have 5 minutes up, but the last question that I want to ask is, what is your advice for young entrepreneurs who are starting, just right out of college?
I think one is to understand that the industry that you're getting into, to completely know everything, basically top down. You start with knowing your industry, the economy, whether the economy supports it. Second is competition. Identify the competition, whether it's a blue ocean or a red ocean. A red ocean is where there are already a lot of brands, the market shares are divided. or a blue ocean is a completely disruptive business where you're getting into a new business for the first time. Identifying gaps in the market, whether you're actually filling a gap or you're just getting into a crowded space, whether it's something you want to do, and what is the objective you're doing it for. Is it to make returns? Because if making returns and money is your objective, then you should get into something that's more disruptive, or that you can have a dominance in. Because unless if you're getting into something for your passion, like we got into this for our design, we knew there are a lot of other brands out there, but we knew we also want to build our own brand. So understanding what your objective is, identifying these things, putting a time period to it, planning things in place. I think one of the mistakes that we did initially was to not hire a team. As co-founders, as founders, you need to be you're the owner, right? You need to think high level. You need to think growth. You need to be networking with people, thinking of strategies to grow. You can't be involved in day-to-day activities. So hiring the right people to manage the business for you while you are thinking of growth is very, very important. In our case, we used to do a lot of operational activities like quality checks. Initially, we used to do for our own clients, packing products. Sometimes we used to then pack products. So I think those things can be avoided. You want to save money initially, yes, that's correct. But I think investing in a team from day one is very important. Even going forward, once you have established a big brand, you have a big team, I think having the right people manage the business for you is important while you still focus on the high level growth. You need to think as an owner. You are not an employee, and you don't have to do everything actually physically. You need to just think and use your brains to get to the right place. So that I think is extremely important. Just be sure what you're getting into and be passionate and be ready to face reality checks and keep going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pratima. And it has been a pleasure having you. And I would, say it that this has been one of the most insightful Breaking the Box conversations I've had so far.